One of the unintended consequences or unintended benefits, you could say, of flat Earth is it's one of the biggest freaking middle fingers that you could give to the establishment.
That is true.
Yeah, because instead of taking establishment A versus establishment B, you're just flipping the finger to both.
Yeah, and you're saying, look, this is the cosmological worldview that you're responsible for giving us. Can you prove it? We know they can't.
Well, they can do the croak like a frog argument. I mean, I'm not a flat earther, right? I think the ultimate problem is you can't really prove anything that you can't test in a lab. And you can only test constituent components of globe Earth in a lab. You can't test the entire theory in a lab. So, like, it's kind of unprovable unless you literally go to space yourself. Even then, you could still make spurious claims about, like, well, that's just your perception saying the Earth is flat. Like, there's nothing objectively saying it's flat other than your eyes, which aren't a really good metric for objectivity in the first place. So, like, I think most claims, no matter how concrete they seem, can't really be proven, not in an absolute sense.
Well, our community for the past 10 years has absolutely measured the surface of the Earth and found no globe curvature all over the world. Still looking for it.
Yeah, but there's plenty of people that have done experiments that have found curvature as well. So, like, it's not. I don't think it's a one-side thing.
Yeah, well, we examine their claims and we can show and demonstrate how they're without merit.
I've not really seen that, but I'll be honest with you, I can't really be bothered to go through that whole thing. I've been in this channel probably more than any of you, to be honest. I've kind of done every argument possible. I've done the star rotations. I've done that one fucking picture where you're on top of a mountain and supposedly the curvature is supposed to be much smaller. I've gone through all of the offshore oil rigs. It's fucking everything.
I'm a big fan of the laser test and the long distance high altitude infrared.
Yeah, the long distance infrared's the one I've seen quite a lot, right? The curvature's like, you can see like 132 miles, right, or something, and then if you calculate it even using like fucking atmospheric refraction, you shouldn't be able to.
So the problem
I've
is
seen the black swan as well.
Yeah, so who measured the curvature for satellites to orbit?
What do you mean?
Like I went so the early rocket program really kicked off with the V2 technology from the Russian or Nazi scientists rather that we had kidnapped and brought here. However that story goes, I mean, America's space program, Russia's space program, we faced off, we started launching rockets all over the place. And one of the goals was to see if we could orbit the Earth. Like where is all of that data? What did they use for their foundational measurements? And can we see the telemetry data from their tests?
I mean, I'm sure they did have data.
How did they measure the freaking radius?
Do you even need data to launch something into orbit? I think you can kind of fucking free will it, right? Like, you just need to know the speed to maintain orbit. I don't think you need to know the curvature, really.
Well, I mean, curvature dictates how much speed you're going to have to use.
That's a good question.
Right? Because, yeah, I mean, the curvature and the geodesic of gravity go hand in hand.
Well, no, because you only need to know how strong gravity is, right? You can kind of don't take this as gospel. I'm kind of just fucking freeballing here. How I'm thinking of it is like, you'd only need to know the circumference of the Earth to calculate the amount of force that you'd be flying against, right? But if you already know the gravity, which we can measure by fucking jumping, I don't think you really need to know the curvature, right?
You do. I'll tell you why. You need to know the vector of gravity. So that means you need to have the vector pointing to a common barycenter of a globe. And that vector has to be rotating about that point of center.
Yeah, but we already know the vector of gravity without knowing that, right? But we can measure where gravity is trending towards without knowing the curvature of the Earth, right? Like for example,
well, what if Earth is flat and we have gravity?
Well, then you'd still be able to measure where it was coming from, even if it was flat. I don't think it's
sure, but you won't be able to orbit.
Well, yeah, of course. That's very true. Well, I guess they assumed it was round, launched things into the sky, and then
Yeah,
they
that's the
happened to be.
story.
Well, then they happened to be right. Otherwise, things wouldn't have orbited. Or if you're on your side of the aisle, then you assume, well, that's false, and it's like a global cabal, right?
Well,
Well,
I don't know
global.
about a cabal. I just like if they just got fucking lucky. I want to know that.
I just like because I'm not a physicist, right? I'm not intimately familiar with the counter arguments. Like I am on a superficial level, but if you asked me to come up with them myself or distill them myself, I'd have trouble, right? But I find it very difficult to believe that there's like almost a shadow government-esque type cabal working together, and like no one's really making efforts to leak any of that. Like I think the extraordinary effort that it would take to keep this under wraps effectively is, in my opinion, like entirely fucking unfeasible. I also don't really see the point of it either. Like
Yeah,
what?
I'll tell you where I've come with this. Like, I don't think there's a cabal hiding a flat Earth from the public. I really don't, and maybe I'm in the minority amongst people on my side on this.
Okay.
What I do see is a history of the space program that was started as a psychological operation after World War II. And in this case, what the intent is, like, what if you want to call it a cabal, fine, but what their aim is not hiding a flat Earth. It's projecting technological superiority that may or
Yeah,
may not exist.
that bit, like that incentive structure obviously exists, right? If you're the US in the space race in the 60s, you have a very, very strong incentive to make it seem like you're more technologically advanced than you are. Totally get that argument. But
Yeah,
I
so could
think
they still think Earth is a globe is my point.
well, that would be my point, is like, let's say you are the US in the 60s and you're like, right, we've got to come up with something quick time to prove that we're like more superior than Russia, right? We've got to do this whole space race thing. Why on earth would you then choose to lie about the shape of the Earth to do that, and also make like a really easily disprovable claim because you can measure curvature and whatnot? Like it doesn't make much sense to me to go with that. I'm just trying to understand the fucking like motives.
I would agree. I'd agree. They're not lying about the shape of the Earth. That's not their aim. They still think it's a globe.
I just think it's really easily measurable, right? Like especially, I mean,
Oh,
I
we're
guess
back to that again.
not measurable in that sense, not like on Earth curvature. I don't think most people understand that, unfortunately. Like in the sense that anyone arguing over calculations probably doesn't understand the implication of atmospheric refraction and other qualia that like come into play, right? Like I don't either, which is why I don't really argue upon that basis. I'm just not qualified enough. But like the idea that everything we've sent into space has to be like fake and all the measurements that are coming back are fake is what I find very hard to digest, especially considering it's come from like many different agencies and in some cases private companies, right? I figure like by now we'd have some kind of visual fucking proof that it wasn't round.
Maybe. I mean, but if their whole aim was to build this apparatus to advance technological claims and discoveries that may not have actually existed, then what they're doing comports exactly with that aim that they stated they'd set out to do in the first place.
Yeah. Well, like, really good example about how I think about this, right? Let's say you're Russia, right? And let's say Russia has verifiably sent stuff into space, right? Which under its own claims it has. As modern Russia, you are massively incentivized to advocate for flat Earth. If you're Russia and you have sent things into space and you've seen the Earth is actually flat, that would be something they would be pushing like wildfire, because their ultimate goal politically is to destabilize the fuck out of the West and the US. And if you could effectively push flat Earth and show a bunch of like photographic evidence from your Sputnik programs that Earth is flat, that would be like a gold mine for anti-US like polarities, right? Like China would be doing that, Russia would be doing that, all of these people would be doing that. The fact that they all agree wholeheartedly when we know for a fact they're massive geopolitical enemies strikes me as very strange.
Well, suppose what if the Russians never actually found out for sure in the first place? You know,
Yeah, that's true.
Secretary of Defense at the time in the United States, Charlie Wilson, famous, but he said regarding Sputnik that it was a scientific trick.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Because then if Russia want to lie about the fact they've gone to space, they then have to agree with the US, right?
Well, yeah, and they thought Earth was a globe when they were faking space themselves.
Yeah, exactly. But then I guess then you'd have to be like, right, I guess every country has lied about going to space. I also find that one semi-difficult to believe.
It is difficult. It's harder to believe that space agencies and commercial space programs can go mad with a delusion or with some kind of trick than it is to accept the reality of the measurements that are available to us. Because flat Earth doesn't hide from anybody. It's not hard to measure the Earth flat in actuality.
Yeah. I mean, I assume you're familiar with the basic arguments, right? Like, what's your argument against like the rotation of the North Sky versus South Sky and stuff like that?
It's not really an argument against. It's what evidence is there that a globe is rotating to cause that effect.
It's not that. It's just that it wouldn't be possible on a flat plane.
Well,
the sky
that
the sky
presumes to know what is and isn't possible, right? I mean, the globe to me is an explanation without evidence.
Well,
I
yeah,
can
so
come up with other
basically,
explanations too that seem plausible.
you can, but you can do that for absolutely anything, and it doesn't really disprove that. Like, if I say, for example, I have a car and the wheels are pushing forward to make it drive, I can go, actually, I can think of other ways that the car could move forward, right? That doesn't really give much validity to your claim just because you can think of other ways that something could possibly happen, right? Like, for example, you eat food and it makes you full. I could go, actually, no. When you eat food, there is a portal in your throat that transfers the food away, and God rewards you with feeling full. Right? Like,
Okay, fine. So
you get what I
here's
mean?
this one. I see stars rotating, and just like a portal in my stomach, I imagine Earth to be a globe.
Yeah, I'm saying you can absolutely imagine that alternate reality, but it just doesn't. There's a lot more supporting evidence for the other one, so naturally, I would go with the other one. It's not that it's proven; it's just there's
Yeah,
far more leaning in that direction. Like you can't
that's
again,
it, man.
like I said earlier, you can't prove these kind of claims because they
The
can't be that
supporting
proven.
evidence is contradictory. It doesn't stand up to its own internal critique in the first instance, and that's kind of the first domino to fall for me.
I'd say the only thing that goes against it is some measurements of curvature on the Earth, and I'm not even sure if that's necessarily true because I'm not really qualified enough to know what other variables go into the ability to see something further than you mathematically should.
Sure.
It
Well,
might
I
not
mean, this
even
is
be
why
a
we've got two legs, right? On the one leg, the globe is not internally consistent with its own claims. It's so full of contradictions it'll make your head spin. Secondly, we've got external validation of our claim of a flat Earth. So we can falsify the globe externally, and the globe doesn't withstand its own claims internally.
Um, yeah, I mean, I just wouldn't agree with what I've seen thus far. Obviously,
Okay.
I think there are some arguments that like do somewhat go against it on the surface of it, but like one, again, I don't personally understand the depth of the arguments enough because I'm not a physicist, so like I'm not really qualified to like combat against it properly. And two, even if you completely disregard curvature measurements, there's still like a plentiful bundle of evidence pointing towards round Earth. Like our entire model of the universe and sort of physics would break down if it wasn't round.
Absolutely.
Oh, you're lagging out sporadic, big time.
Huh?
Oh, I think
Am I
you're back.
roboting?
Oh, no, you're good now. I think you're back.
Shit. Testing.
Yeah, you're okay.
The curvature measurements are what we've been looking for. I can't find any.
I mean, you can do the experiment yourself, right? With two sticks, you can do the shadow experiment.
Yeah, but do you realize why logically and geometrically it's not proof? Why it's absolutely deficient?
No, it's not proof by itself, but it's a part of a larger collective bundle of proof. Like me jumping doesn't prove gravity, but it's an implication that the other arguments for gravity are also now slightly more supported. And when you get to enough coalesced support in a single like collective group of evidence, then that tends to be the most likely option, or seems like the most likely option.
Well, when I use sticks to measure shadows, I'm observing an object in the sky that's a point of reference. And somebody else is too. The fact that we can measure different shadow lengths is a consequence of the apparent divergence of light from that common point of source. right?
Yes,
So
but you get
for you to
different. But you
for you to
get.
get a globe out of that, you have to say that that's not a single point source of light.
Oh, you don't. No. You.
Yeah, you do. You say no, that the diverging angles that the two of us are measuring are not really diverging from a point source. They're actually parallel.
Yeah, but then you'd have a different measurement. That's the point, right?
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't.
You know,
The geometry is preserved.
Oh, you absolutely would. I promise you, right? Like if you have
I can prove it geometrically to you.
well, if you have a light in a room, for example, like let's say my bedroom that I'm currently sitting in, I have a light at the top of that, right? If I then have a table below it and I have a globe on the right side and a flat plane on the left side, if I place two sticks the equal amount of distance from one another on both the flat plane and the globe, the resultant shadow differential between the two sticks will be vastly different because obviously then two different shapes, right? You can do that one in a lab, and then you can also then follow that up by showing that the distance between the
On a
sticks
flat table.
Yeah. So if basically the distance between two sticks on a flat Earth and a globe Earth would have different shadow results than one another.
I don't see how that would be the case. Because
You don't?
no, because what we have right now is what we observe as a point source of light in the sky, like I said. Okay. And what we observe are two different shadow lengths as a consequence of two different simultaneous observers getting two different angles to the same thing in the sky.
But the
right?
the inference
That's number
difference.
one.
So wait, sorry, you can finish your point first. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, so what is going to be inferred here is that the only way that this can happen is that the table must be curved, the flat surface we're on must be curved, and the light is coming from not a point, but a flat surface in the sky. You realize that the reason why people believe in the globe is because they think the sun's surface is relatively flat.
But that
They
wouldn't
move the
have.
flat surface from this ground into the sky.
Let me try and like explain this with like a drawing.
That's where you
or
get the
something.
parallel rays from. Where else do you get parallel rays from? But from an effectively flat surface.
No, you can get parallel rays from anything. From basically
Well,
any
the
shape.
claim is the sun shoots off effectively parallel rays, and so the point source is no longer the sun but the Earth.
I don't really know what you mean by that.
And the reason why you have diverging angles is because two people are at an angle of rotation away from each other on that curved surface. And that angle of rotation is the angle by which they see different points, a different point of reference in the sky for the sun.
I'm confused about what you're saying here. Are you saying that rays could only be parallel if it's a flat sun?
Well, yeah, that's how. Like the sun's surface is so big and round, and Earth is so teeny tiny that, for all intents and purposes, the rays emanating off of this massive sun compared to a tiny point-sized Earth are parallel.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so an effectively flat surface casting rays to a tiny point Earth. Now you can flip this thing upside down and say an effectively flat surface of Earth and a point source of light in the sky for the sun. What is happening is a geometric equivalence is created here between the two cosmologies. When you measure these sticks and shadows, and you presume Earth to be curving, you need a flat surface somewhere, and you put that flat surface up in the sky instead. So you take a surface that you can measure, and you put it in this. Well, that's how you get the parallel rays.
I don't think the geometric equivalence in terms of like changing their shape, if you don't also like equivalize their sizes, I don't think that quite follows. Also, old dude, I simply don't understand what the graph is trying to make, so I can't really respond to that. I don't really understand the claim it's trying to make. You might have to give me a bit of context. especially since it's in French. Well, let's just say parallel rays and divergent rays, right? That shouldn't be too tricky.
We can measure the surface flat, so why should we assume it's curving?
I don't think we can measure it flat. Not with
I would
the
love
shadow
a curvature
experiment, anyway.
measurement, honest to God. I keep coming back to that. I've studied their claims in a geodetic surveying. I've studied celestial navigation. I see where the mathematical, call it tricks are, where the globe is hiding. The globe is able to be constructed out of margins of error that are created synthetically, that don't really exist themselves.
Okay. So I kind of need to do some learning on the fly to compete
Yeah,
with this, I guess.
like it's a terribly complex topic, and it's really hard to do on the fly research.
Yeah,
It's
like I
taken me a
haven't
long
done
time to get to this
geometry
point.
since fucking like high school, so I need to like remember if what you're saying like makes mathematical sense or not. Obviously,
Yeah.
I don't think you're lying to me. You don't give me that impression at all. But yeah, I just want to check up and make sure I can like follow what you're saying. I don't want to kind of like just assume it's right. Like Chinese Aristophanes figured Earth was flat at the same time as Aristophanes with a closer sun divergent rays. We get the same result.
Yeah, that's another point. Thanks for bringing that up, whoever's posting this in text. What I'm saying isn't even like fringe. Astronomy departments talk about how Eratosthenes sticks and shadows is also geometrically problematic for the same reasons that I pointed out.
No, sorry, I didn't say what you were saying was the French. I wasn't trying to make like this is jumbled in my head. He literally posted a graph with French writing on. That's what I was referring to then. Not you, sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. I wasn't thinking that either, but
okay, bro.
What I'm saying about this geometric equivalence between the two is absolutely spot on, and is something that is pointed out by astronomy departments, philosophy of mathematics departments studying the Eratosthenes case. And we even so happen to have a historical figure in China who is a contemporary of Eratosthenes who performed a similar setup. But because their worldview was that Earth is observed and measurably flat in the first instance, then this test affirmed their flat Earth cosmology, which remained as such until the 1600s. So
basically,
it's not I'm a crazy flat earther coming up with this shit.
So what I'm understanding basically is if we take Eratosthenes, that's how you say the name is. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at pronouncing his name. I only ever read it. The Greek guy who did the experiment. So if you can absolutely change the mass, shape, and size of the sun and Earth to make it so those experiments match up with a flat Earth.
Totally.
But you would then basically require more proof on the side of those new sizes than the current ones we have, and there would be loads of other supporting phenomena that wouldn't necessarily match up with that, right? So from what I understand, if you were to change the size, shape, and mass of the sun and Earth to match this experiment on a flat plane, one, the sun would have to be only a few thousand kilometers away, and the light rays would then obviously diverge noticeably, and that can create different angles at different locations, right? So that would explain that. But you would also need, like, I guess height and horizontal distance of the sun would have to be exactly adjusted so angle difference grows like linearly.
Oh yeah, you don't have anything on a globe for a distance to the sun, so yeah, we can put it anywhere we want to.
Right. In both cosmologies, listen, flat or globe, you can't triangulate the height of the sun. You can't triangulate it on a globe because the rays are parallel, and you have no way to converge them onto a point to do a triangulation. And the way the sun appears to us on flat Earth is it's in an observer-dependent location, kind of like a rainbow.
So if the sun was only a couple thousand kilometers away,
well, we don't know. We don't know how far away it is. That's the thing.
You do. There's only really two possibilities. So
I deny that claim. I don't make it. I can tell you why.
We'll try and go through it with each other. If you think there's problems, that's fine. You can call them out. I'm trying to come here like good faith, right? So like if you do point out like a genuine problem with it, I'll definitely go through it with you. This is just what I understand currently, right? So if you've got spherical Earth and a distant sun, then Eratosthenes just works automatically. If you've got a flat Earth and a spherical sun, then the only way that his measurements work and the measurements you can do today with two sticks work is if the sun is about 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers away. I don't know the exact measurement, but there will be one. So you then have to invent another third model to justify any other distance. Otherwise, the experiment with the sticks wouldn't come out with the results it does, right? That's kind of my understanding thus far.
Well, so the way I see it is people who believe in the globe have to assume that the sun is at a vast distance and is of immense size, such that the rays that it casts off are effectively parallel. This is something that cannot be proven and is not observed.
I mean that is observed equally as the other side of it on the Aristotelians, but
you don't observe parallel rays. You actually measure diverging rays.
I already posted a picture of it in the chat.
Yeah, I know, but we observe functionally parallel rays, which is why when we did up-to-date experiments to extrapolate upon Aristotelians' experiments, we got slightly different results because obviously his wasn't perfect because he was assuming parallel rays, but they're that close to being functionally parallel for us because it's that far away that the experiment turned out to be relatively accurate.
Yeah, prove how far the sun is.
Yeah, I'm going
through this with you, right? I'm going through this with you, right? But that's why we need to get to this bit. That's why we need to get to this bit, right? So you, again, if you
conclude logically that these rays are parallel, like what is the logical train? That's what's missing.
I don't think they're parallel. I think they're functionally parallel. Two very different things.
Yeah. Okay. So functionally parallel. How do you go from observing diverging rays from two different locations to saying, well, those have to be functionally parallel? What's the chain of logic? I'll tell you what, there isn't any.
Well, I'll try and come up with like an analogy for you. So
yeah,
like,
I want the logical train though. That like, how do I get to that conclusion?
Well, it's something is functionally X or Y when assuming such doesn't change the results of things, right? So like, for example, funnily enough, I have to use another globe analogy here, right? Even if the globers are right, Earth still technically isn't a perfect globe, right? The Grand Canyon exists. There's fucking like ditches and troughs everywhere. There's mountains, right? But it's functionally a globe because when you measure it as such, the results don't qualitatively change because it's that small of a divergence from what you're measuring functionally, right? Like we can measure divergence, but it doesn't really have that many implications because if you assume it's parallel, you basically end up with the same results within a margin of error.
Right. So here's how I imagine this going down. You got Eratosthenes, okay? He does this stick and shadow thing, and he says, well, this here basically proves that Earth is a sphere because we have to assume that these diverging rays we measured are functionally parallel. His detractor that he's speaking with says, oh, yeah? How did you come to that conclusion when the only thing that you have to base this assumption off of is your imagination?
Oh, you just guessed it.
We can actually measure diverging rays physically in the real world.
Well, he just guessed it, right? Like this wasn't a robust debate in ancient Athens. They didn't have a fucking clue.
No, they actually didn't, but they got lucky. Like NASA got lucky with orbiting satellites.
Well, no,
and moon landings. They only need one shot at it.
Well, yeah, naturally, I don't think those two things are equivalent, right? If you do, fair enough. But like again, he didn't have proof that sun's rays were parallel or even close to parallel. He was just fucking YOLOing it and having fun in 300 BC, which is why the rest of the world still believe. Well, yeah, that's why the rest of the world still believed the Earth was flat for like 2,000 years, right? Like he was fucking alone for the most part in that. It wasn't really till what, Galileo, right? But that aside, just back to the thing we were on before, right? So do you think there's a third model, right? Because if we've already gone through, right, spherical Earth plus distant sun, Eratosthenes works automatically. If you have a flat Earth and a sun about 3,000, 4,000 kilometers away, then Eratosthenes also works automatically. But do you think there's a third model then, where
They're
It's something I'm
potentially
not
they're
accounting for.
potentially infinite models that can fit the explanation. That's a mathematical philosophical truth.
Yeah, that's probably true. But then you need to alter
Right?
the
And
size like
this actually
constantly.
supports your earlier point where you said that it's really difficult to prove things.
What we know for sure is well, not for sure, but very likely is if Earth was flat, then the sun has to be within a nearby range to produce the current rays it does.
Well, that assumes that it is an object that occupies a 3D space from our ability to observe it.
Not really.
Rainbows are an example of an optical phenomenon that does not occupy a definitive space that's determined in 3D.
It does. It absolutely does occupy space because light is there causing that, right? Like
You can't
light is
triangulate a
still.
rainbow.
I mean, you can triangulate the light.
You
It
can't
just doesn't.
triangulate a rainbow. No. You can't go chasing rainbows. It's a vector. Here, this is from the Journal of the Elisha Mitchell Scientific Society, Department of Psychology, University of North Carolina. It's called Alternate Interpretations of Eratosthenes' Two Sticks, 1988. So the abstract says, over 2,000 years ago, Eratosthenes coupled logical thought with crude measurement to estimate the circumference of the Earth with what could be considered to be amazing accuracy. However, his observations would have led him to a very different conclusion if he'd used another set of presuppositions in interpreting his observations. Scientists should always remain aware of the fact that finding data which are consistent with a particular hypothesis does not rule out the possibility of other viable hypotheses.
I agree. However, there is just too much evidence in favor of this one because every single different calculation we do gives us the same result or very, very close to Eratosthenes, right?
Well,
Which is kind of like
because you're operating within a unified framework. But I can point out that
that's how we do science, though. That is how we do science, right? Because
we subject that framework to internal and external validation measures,
yeah, exactly.
and it fails. And I can give examples.
I just don't think this one fails as much as the other ones fail because it does fail in certain areas, but that's kind of the point is that the other ones fail more, which is why I side with this. I don't think it's perfect. I just think it's better than the alternatives, right? Because so many things, like if you take the experiment in isolation, right? Sure, you can make a bunch of change. You can change every assumption to basically give you different results with Eratosthenes, right? But then if you measure the other ways of looking at the sun's potential distance from Earth, they all tend to align with the idea that it's a fucking sphere far away, right? Like solar parallax, for example. If there was a nearby sun, if it was thousands of kilometers away, then you'd see degrees of parallax between different locations, not arc seconds. Right?
Solar parallax is also presumptive of the globe and orbits, which haven't been measured. Let me tell you something.
You're completely right.
We've got hundreds and hundreds of, call them 0-day exploits of the globe. And I'll give you one because I have to go and listen only because I have some work I need to do, but I'll give you one.
Okay, no worries.
This is a very fascinating thing. You can look this up and research it yourself, and it's a mind bender. Every 4 years, the sun actually gives you an extra day, and this is not due to a leap year, an accumulation of like solar time against a calendar. If you were to take a stick in the ground like Eratosthenes, and let's say choose the winter solstice. And on this particular day, you measure the shadow, take a picture of it, and you count how many times the sun rises and sunsets to get to that particular point in time. You'll have 365 days on 1 year, 365 sunups and sundowns on another year, 365 sunups and sundowns on the next year, and on the next year, you need 366 of them to get back to where it was. It's not that there are 365.246 whatever days a year, and every 4 years you have a leap year that you add to the calendar to make up for that incremental 1/4 day that gets lost. That's not what's physically happening in the tropical year. And you can look this up in meteorological records, pick any major city that's got a meteorology office and tracks these things locally. I don't care what country you're in, you will find this pattern of every 3 years, You have 365 sunups and sundowns, and 366 on the 4th year, and that extra day and that extra year, or that for that year, does not line up with the leap year. That extra day is actually 2 years offset from when we do the actual leap year. But it's been going on. I mean, how do you explain that with the solar system? It's how do you explain an extra physical day with the solar system?
I I think you're confusing some things here. A year doesn't exist. It's socially constructed. There is no year.
This is a tropical year. It's a tropical year based off of where the sun goes through a cycle and returns to its original starting point.
Yeah, but a tropical year doesn't increase every 4th year. It's the same every year. It's 365.2422 days.
No, it's not though. It is actually 300. It's actually 365 days and a 366th day, going on a 3-1-3-1-3-1 cycle.
I need some evidence of that for sure.
I know you do. I'm not in a position to provide it right now, but if you want to chat with me later, I'll give you some. But I looked this up myself. I looked up records in America and in Russia, and they both comported with each other on this. And it's a known phenomenon too. It's just not really talked about. Like, they're not going to teach you all the globe problems in school.
Obviously, it's fine.
I did too.
Now. I know you're busy and everything. That's absolutely fine.
Yep.
But yeah, what have you DM'd me, old dude? Shall I check? Oh, okay, you have. Awesome, thank you.
All right, take care. I'll be around to listen.
All right, thanks for the conversation, bro. Have a good one.
You too.